I stared at my reflection in the elevator doors of Memorial Health Hospital, adjusting my blazer one last time. 10 years ago, I'd walked out of these same doors in tears after dropping out of medical school. Now I was returning as someone entirely different, though my family didn't know that yet. "Dr. Sarah Carter?" A voice called as I stepped into the lobby. "The board is waiting for you in conference room A." I nodded, suppressing a smile. If only my father could see me now. Dr. James Carter, the renowned surgeon, who'd spent years telling everyone how his daughter had failed him by quitting medical school in her 3rd year. "She couldn't handle the pressure," he'd say at every family gathering, shaking his head in disappointment. "Now look at her working some corporate job instead of saving lives like a real doctor." What he didn't know was that while he was busy criticizing my choices, I'd been building something bigger than he could imagine. Today's meeting would finalize my private equity firm's acquisition of Memorial Health, the very hospital where he'd built his reputation. The conference room doors opened to reveal the hospital's entire board of directors. "Dr. Carter," Chairman Wilson stood to greet me. "Everything is ready for signing." As I took my seat, my phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "Don't forget Thanksgiving dinner tonight. Your father expects everyone there by 6. I smiled, thinking about the timing. In exactly 8 hours, I would be sitting at my parents' dining table, listening to the usual litany of disappointments. But this time would be different. "Before we proceed," I addressed the board, "I want to confirm one detail. All staff contracts will be honored under the new ownership?" "Yes," Wilson nodded. "Though we're curious about your insistence on keeping the current surgical team intact. Let's just say I have a personal interest in maintaining Memorial's excellence in surgery," I replied, thinking of my father's department. As I signed the final papers, making me the owner of Memorial Health, I couldn't help but remember the day I'd left medical school. I discovered that while I loved medicine, my true talent lay in fixing broken systems rather than broken bodies. Instead of becoming another surgeon, I'd chosen to build a company that acquired and transformed struggling hospitals. "Congratulations, Dr. Carter," Wilson said, shaking my hand. "Memorial Health is now yours." I checked my watch, 2 p.m. Just 4 hours until Thanksgiving dinner, where my family would once again gather to remind me of my greatest failure. "One more thing," I said to Wilson. "I'd like the board to join me for dinner tonight. There's someone I think you should meet." As I drove to my parents' house later that evening, I thought about how everything was about to change. The familiar ache of being the family disappointment had fueled me for years, driving me to build something they couldn't ignore. I pulled into the driveway, noticing my brother's Tesla parked front and center. The pride of place as always. Michael, the successful cardiologist who'd followed in our father's footsteps. The perfect son. Inside, the house smelled of turkey and judgment. Mom hugged me briefly, already distracted by her hosting duties. Dad barely looked up from his wine glass. "Sarah," Michael called out, smirking. "Still working in business? You know, Dad just saved another life today. What did you do? Look at spreadsheets." I took a deep breath, checking my phone. The board would be arriving soon. "Actually," I started, but Dad cut me off. "At least she has a job," he sighed. "Though it's a shame she couldn't handle medical school. All that potential wasted on pushing papers." The doorbell rang. "Are we expecting someone else?" Mom asked, frowning. I stood up, smoothing my blazer. "Yes, actually. Some colleagues of mine." I walked to the door, my heart pounding with anticipation. "And Dad? They have something interesting to tell you about Memorial Health." The door opened to reveal Chairman Wilson and the entire hospital board, all smiling at me with newfound respect. "Dr. Carter," Wilson said loudly, "your acquisition of Memorial Health is complete. Shall we discuss your plans for the surgical department with your father?" The sound of my mother's wine glass shattering on the floor was just the beginning. The silence in the dining room was deafening. My father's face had drained of all color, his usual confident posture crumbling as Chairman Wilson's words sank in. My brother Michael's smirk had frozen into something between disbelief and horror. I don't understand," my father finally managed, looking between me and the board members. "Acquisition, Sarah." Chairman Wilson stepped forward, seemingly oblivious to the family drama unfolding. "Dr. Carter, your daughter's private equity firm has been transforming struggling hospitals across the country. Memorial Health is her 10th acquisition this year. My mother, still frozen by her shattered wine glass, whispered, 10 hospitals? 11 actually, I corrected quietly. We closed on St. Luke's last month. Michael stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. This is ridiculous. Sarah couldn't even finish medical school. How could she possibly own the hospital where you and Dad work? I finished for him, finally allowing myself a small smile. Would you like to see the paperwork? Dad's hands were trembling slightly as he set down his wine glass. Why wasn't I informed about this sale? I'm the head of surgery. The board was under strict confidentiality, Chairman Wilson explained. Dr. Carter, Sarah, insisted on keeping the acquisition quiet until everything was finalized. I moved to help Mom clean up the broken glass, but she waved me away, still staring at me like she was seeing a stranger. In a way she was. They'd all been so busy mourning the doctor I didn't become, they'd never bothered to see who I actually was. Your daughter's company has an impressive track record, one of the board members added. The hospitals she's acquired have shown remarkable improvements in both patient care and financial stability. My father's face darkened. So this is your revenge? Buying the hospital to what? Fire me. I felt a flash of hurt, quickly replaced by determination. Even now he assumed the worst of me. Actually, Dad, if you'd let me finish earlier, I was going to tell you that we're expanding the surgical department. Double the operating rooms, new equipment, increased staff. We've seen her proposals, Chairman Wilson nodded. The changes will make Memorial Health one of the top surgical centers in the country. Michael sank back into his chair looking stunned. But you're not even a real doctor. No, I agreed, meeting his eyes steadily. I'm not. I'm someone who looks at broken systems and fixes them. Someone who sees potential where others see failure. I turned to my father, who hadn't moved from his spot at the head of the table. You always said I couldn't handle the pressure of medicine. But while you were telling everyone about my failure, I was building something bigger than any single surgeon could achieve. The turkey was getting cold, the carefully set table forgotten as my family struggled to process the shift in power. Mom had finally cleaned up the broken glass but remained standing, as if sitting might make this reality too real. How? She asked softly. How did you do all this without us knowing? I thought about all the family dinners I'd sat through, biting my tongue as they dismissed my corporate job. The holidays where I'd listened to stories about Michael's surgical victories while they ignored my growing success. It was easier than you'd think, I replied. None of you ever asked about my work. You were too busy focusing on what I wasn't to see what I had become. Chairman Wilson cleared his throat. Perhaps we should discuss the new surgical wing over dinner? Dr. Carter, James, your experience will be invaluable as we implement these changes. My father looked up at me, and for the first time in 10 years I saw something new in his eyes. Uncertainty. The power dynamic had shifted irrevocably and he knew it. Sarah, he started, then stopped, seemingly at a loss for words. But this wasn't about revenge or power. It was about finally being seen for who I was, not who they'd wanted me to be. The board members are staying for dinner, I said, taking my seat at the table. We have a lot to discuss about Memorial Health's future. Your future, Dad. As everyone awkwardly found their places around the dining table, I caught my reflection in the window. I saw what they were all finally seeing. Not a failed medical student, but a woman who had built an empire her own way. The real question was, were they ready to accept this new reality? The dinner that followed was unlike any other in our family's history. The perfectly roasted turkey sat largely untouched as Chairman Wilson detailed my plans for Memorial Health. With each revelation, I watched my family's perceptions crumble and rebuild. The new pediatric wing will open next spring, I explained, meeting my father's gaze. We're bringing in cutting-edge technology that most hospitals can only dream about. The funding for that would be... Michael started, his voice trailing off. $50 million, I finished. Just for the initial phase. Mom's hand trembled as she reached for her water glass. She'd switched from wine after dropping the first one. But Sarah, how? Where did you get that kind of money? I took a slow breath, remembering the long journey that had led to this moment. Remember that small healthcare consulting firm I started after leaving medical school? The one you called my little business venture? Dad shifted uncomfortably in his seat, no doubt remembering his dismissive comments. That little venture, grew into Carter Healthcare Solutions. We specialize in turning around struggling hospitals, making them both profitable and better for patient care. I paused, letting that sink in. Last year's revenue was just over $800 million. Michael choked on his water. Chairman Wilson smiled knowingly. He'd seen the numbers during the acquisition process. All those times you were too busy to attend family functions, Mom said slowly. You weren't just avoiding us, were you? No, I replied softly. I was building something. I was flying around the country, meeting with hospital boards, securing investments, creating change. But none of you ever asked what I was actually doing. My father, who hadn't spoken much since the board's arrival, finally found his voice. Why didn't you tell us? The question hung in the air, heavy with years of unspoken hurt. I set down my fork and looked directly at him. Would you have listened, Dad? Really listened? Or would you have just told me again how I was wasting my potential by not becoming a surgeon? His face flushed, but he didn't argue. He couldn't. Not with the hospital board sitting at his table, not with the evidence of my success so clearly displayed. Dr. Carter, Chairman Wilson addressed my father, your daughter has revolutionized healthcare management across 6 states. The medical journal is running a feature on her next month. I watched as pride and embarrassment battled across my father's face. For the first time, he was seeing me through someone else's eyes, not as his failed daughter, but as a force in the medical world, albeit in a different way than he'd imagined. The surgical department, he said finally, his voice rough. You're really expanding it? Yes, I nodded. Because despite everything, Dad, you're an excellent surgeon. The department you've built deserves to grow. This isn't about revenge, it's about making something better. Tears welled in Mom's eyes. Oh, Sarah. We've been so blind. Michael, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly stood up. I need some air, he muttered, heading for the patio. I followed him outside, leaving the board members discussing plans with our parents. The night air was crisp, carrying the last hints of autumn. All these years, Michael said without turning around, I've been looking down on you, the family failure, my little sister who couldn't cut it in medical school. And now? I asked quietly. He turned and I saw something I'd never seen in my brother's eyes before: respect. Now I work for you, he said with a short laugh. How's that for irony? No, I corrected him. You work with me. That's the difference, Michael. I didn't do this to lord power over anyone. I did it because I saw a way to help more people than I ever could have as just one doctor. Back inside, I could hear the board members preparing to leave. As we walked back in, Dad stood up from his chair. Sarah, he said, his voice different somehow. Would you show me those plans for the new surgical wing? I smiled, reaching for my briefcase. Actually, Dad, I'd like your input on them. You know better than anyone what the department needs. As we spread the blueprints across the cleared dinner table, I felt the shift in the room. The old dynamics were gone, replaced by something new, something healthier.